So, hello everybody. Welcome to this live. If you are watching live, just let me know you can see me and hear me. So, I'm going to start in just a minute, just a minute. But I just really wanted to double check that this was going to work because this is the first time I've scheduled or broadcast live on YouTube. So, we're going to start in just a sec, but I'll tell you what the topic we're going to talk about. Someone in my Facebook group asked the question, what are the signs of healing? Is it, for example, less symptoms, or is it just that you relate to the symptoms in another way? This person says, I find that sleep is one important mark. If my sleep is better, then my nervous system is in a better state. So I'm going to explore this topic, and my goal is to give you some insights into what you can focus on to support your healing and recovery. And I think those two words are different things, healing and recovery. So we'll explore the difference between healing and recovery. And I'd really be interested in your thoughts. So anyway, if you are watching me live, I can see there's a few people watching live. Do pop a comment in the chat just so I know you're there. Say hi. Feel free to say where you are in the world if you like. And I'd be interested to know, what are your thoughts about signs of healing? So if you've got any thoughts on that, feel free to just add them as we go along. If you're watching the replay, just put hashtag replay. If you're watching live, hashtag live, just so I know the chat is working. All right, so let's get started. So why is this important? Why is it important to understand the signs of healing? Well, one of the things that can happen is that we can overlook the signs of progress. Okay. For example, I've worked with clients and, at certain points they were feeling a bit low, feeling like they weren't making progress. And when I pointed out to them, so Catherine says, hi from Germany. Thanks for the invitation. You are welcome. Thanks for saying hello. If you've just joined, feel free to say hi in the chat. So I had a client I've had a few clients who kind of were feeling they weren't making progress. But when we actually looked at the progress they'd made with some metrics, these were subjective metrics that they'd kind of identified. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do an audit so you can get a sense of where you are right now. Because in order to measure our progress, we need to start with where we are right now. So I'll tell you how you can get hold of free training to help you do that. And when I pointed out the changes that this client had made, or these clients had made, they felt encouraged. Now, the issue with that is they're dependent on me to help them recognize that they've made progress. And my job is to make them great coaches for themselves. So they've got an inner coach who's going to support them, encourage them, is going to be that pragmatic voice when they are despondent, who can say, well, actually, let's just look at this in a pragmatic way. And when we look at things in a bigger picture, you can see the progress you've made. So it's ultimately my job to make myself redundant. And for instance, when I do the Building Resilience group program, I'm going to have another one starting in July. I get people to set up a peer group and they meet regularly, often weekly, and they find it really brilliant because actually one of the ways we learn is by teaching each other. And so it's not probably a good business model to make myself redundant, but I am in the business of empowerment. So I feel like that's kind of aligned with my values. Okay. So, my goal is to give people tools so that they can actually see the signs they're healing and, see the progress they're making. So, again, if you just joined us, feel free to say hello. I can see a few people are watching, so do say hi. Let me know where you are in the world. So, what are the things we need to look at? What are the signs of healing that we can measure? Now, some of this, there are some objective tests you can do. For instance, on Dr. Sarah Myhill's website, she's got about 31 tests. Okay. that you could use as a sign of healing, sign of progress, sign of recovery. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to talk too much about those. I will say that Dr. Michael is fairly scathing that a lot of doctors, she says, they're a bit lazy and they don't do tests that they should do that can help people make sense of where they are. I want you to consider that some of the signs of healing are a kind of precursor of recovery. For example, if someone is feeling more calm and therefore sleeping better, obviously they might not be fully recovered, but the fact that they are generating more calm is going to actually help support their healing. But some of these signs can be an indicator of recovery. So if someone is sleeping better because their body is healing, and they're not so much in a state of fight or flight, then that actually can be a sign itself. So let's just talk a bit about how we measure signs of healing. There are a number of tests, assessment scales that you can access. One is called the FSS, that stands for Fatigue Severity Scale. There's the Assessment Shoulder Fatigue Scale. There's some controversy around Trudy Cholder because she was one of the people who was very involved in the graded exercise therapy. Okay, but there's another one called the SF36 assessment scale. Maybe I'll put the links to all these scales so you can check them out. There's one called the Facet F Index. And I actually, when I work with people, one of the things we do when we have a chat is we do a couple of audits, okay? And you can access these audits if you'd like to access them. There's a video that walks you through how to use them. Then comment audit in the chat and I will send you the link to those audits. Actually, maybe I'll put the link below this video as well, but do comment. So hi, Dana. Dana says she's from Israel. Amazing. So I've got a truly international audience. So yeah, and the goal of that really simple audit I get people to do is, it's not scientific, but it gives people a measure of where they are. And when I start working with someone, we revisit that audit in about a month's time. And so people can start to see, they can track where they're making progress. They can focus on the areas that need a bit more work. Okay. So that's one way of kind of identifying, signs of healing using those assessment scales. Some of those assessment scales are kind of negative in that, if your energy score is is not good, you get a high score. All right. I prefer to use a positive scale where, for instance, if we're scoring someone's calm level out of 10, 10 is super calm. Okay. So I prefer a positive scale. It's probably due to my training as a hypnotherapist. So, and if you like, you can just let me know, for instance, right now on a scale of 0 to 10, what number would you be for calm, with 10 being very calm? Maybe we'll end with a short relaxation if you'd like that. Let me know. Put a yes if you would like a short relaxation at the end. Now, there's a book by Professor Robert Sapolsky. Let me just grab that. He is a professor of neurobiology at Stanford University. And he talks about the effects of stress. Okay. He talks about kind of 5 key areas. And so one of the things we can do is to score that. Okay. Is to score these 5 areas. LM1 is saying, hi, it's Alan. Hi, Alan. Nice to have you with us. So the first thing we can actually consider is our energy levels. Now, mentioned Dr. Sarah Myhill. She offers a mitochondria test. You may know that some while ago there was some controversy about this test. The ME Association posted saying it wasn't a reliable test, and Dr. Myhill refuted that. You can find all that information by just Googling it. But in very simple terms, you could do, just when I get people to do that audit that I just showed you, I get people to score their energy battery. If you were to score your energy levels on a scale of 0 to 10, what number would you give them currently? Okay. Um, so as I say, if you revisit that in a week's time, in a month's time, you can start to see what changes you've made. Okay. The next thing Robert Sapolsky talks about is sleep. What he says is that when we're in a state of stress, it affects our sleep quality. So we know that when we're in that fight, flight, freeze response, that's going to affect the quality of our sleep. We do important repair work when we're asleep. And if we're not getting that deep delta sleep, then the body's not carrying out important repair functions. When we activate consistently the parasympathetic nervous system response, the rest and digest response, then actually we start to achieve deep, refreshing sleep. So, the person who asked this question commented that she finds that when her sleep is better, she feels like her nervous system is in a better state. And that makes complete sense. Okay. And so just consider, what score would you give your sleep quality on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being excellent, normal sleep? Feel free to put a number in the chat, put sleep and a number if you like, you don't have to. The next metric Professor Sapolsky talks about is digestion. Now, there's a whole range of tests that you can do to kind of measure your digestion. Certainly, when I first had ME/CFS, my digestion was really in a not good state. It was very dysregulated. I won't go into the details of that, but my digestive system just wasn't working properly. And as I started to address a number of factors, then my digestion started to improve over time. Okay. Again, if you were to just assess kind of, what state your digestion is in, and this is subjective, but what number would you give out of 10? Whereas 10, my digestion's fine, 0 or 1, it's really not good. 1 point, for instance, I had a doctor and a herbalist identify or diagnose leaky gut syndrome, and that means that food particles are moving through the wall of the gut into your bloodstream, and when that happens, your pancreas starts producing lots of my brain's gone dead. The stuff the pancreas produces. Insulin, and then my blood sugar would crash, and I'd feel exhausted, and so that explanation made a lot of sense. And as I started to address that, then I started to feel better and was able to eat without feeling exhausted. And you could also just generally, in a very general way, assess your nutrition. Okay. Again, this is something I get clients to do. Would you say you're red, orange, or green? Red, my nutrition is shocking. Orange, it's okay, could be better. Green, it's great. Okay, that was one area that I was pretty good at, because this doctor made some recommendations: give up sugar, eat a whole food diet, plenty of veg, plenty of protein, low glycemic index, i.e. foods that don't produce a lot of sugar. And so my nutrition was very good. Okay, but what would you say for your nutrition? Is it currently red, orange, or green? And obviously that's not necessarily, if you're kind of changing your nutrition, that's not necessarily a sign of healing, but it's one of the kind of building blocks that can support the body's attempts to heal. Because if you're eating a diet that's very high in sugar, very high in processed foods, that we know causes inflammation, and that's going to hinder your body's attempts to heal. All right. So the next thing Professor Sapolsky talks about is our cognitive function. And when we're in fight or flight, then that kind of dampens down our ability to do clever, creative thinking. and we're more likely to be reactive. And, obviously a very common issue for people with ME, CFS, long COVID is reduced brain capacity, brain fog. Okay. And so another sign of healing is when you do feel like you've got a greater capacity to think. There were times when I couldn't even look at a screen or watch telly because I just didn't have the capacity. As I started to get better, my capacity improved. Okay. And then the next thing is immune system. Again, there are tests your doctor can do. Um, and I'm not a doctor, so I won't go into that. But in very simple terms, some people recognize when they have ME/CFS is that their immune system is in overdrive and they don't get flu, etc. But for some people, they recognize their immune system is under functioning, and they get everything that's going around. They're always getting colds, flus, sore throats, and that certainly was the case for me at one point. Okay, so that's a whole another way of kind of just monitoring and getting a sense of your healing. Okay, I'll just mention those 5 areas again: energy, sleep, digestion, cognitive function, and immune system. Okay, so another kind of way of looking at signs of healing is using the PEMS model. Okay, the P stands for physical. Okay, so what is your physical capacity, for instance? How much physical activity can you do currently? What level of symptoms are you experiencing? If people start to notice that they can actually increase their window of tolerance of symptoms, i.e., they're experiencing symptoms, but they recognize they're not stressing about that, then that is a sign of some healing at an emotional level. Okay. And for instance, if symptoms are reducing, if you're able to do activity and the amount of post exertional malaise is reducing, or you get to the point where you can do certain without post exertional malaise, that's a sign of healing. So, for instance, if someone who wasn't able to do much activity at one point, I couldn't walk for more than 1 minute. So, when I could actually walk for 5 minutes without post exertional malaise, that was a massive sign of progress for me. Okay. And it gave me confidence that I could build up to 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Okay. So again, you could just score that, what is your current level of physical health at the moment out of 10? You don't have to overthink it, but just what is your sense if you were to score that? Again, feel free to put a score in the chat currently. And the point is, if you've got a chart where you're measuring all this, you can actually start to see where you're making progress, as I say. So the E, so we're getting some numbers, 6, 4, 4, 5, excellent. So you've got a sense of where you are. And I'd love to know, is that an improvement on where you were? Okay, just let me know in the chat. So the E stands for emotion. Okay, so we can either be overwhelmed by our emotions, we can be overwhelmed by the physical sensations we're experiencing that can trigger emotions, and that can result in unhelpful, comforting behaviors. We're motivated to avoid pain and to achieve pleasure. So if someone is binging on biscuits, ice cream, or smoking, or taking drugs or whatever, as a way of dealing with their emotions and trying to get a bit of pleasure, then that's an indicator of how well they're dealing with the emotions. And I appreciate the challenges of dealing with physical symptoms, etc. But I know, for instance, there's someone I know who I met at an ME group who decided that his strategy was to use marijuana. And actually, that resulted in him being hospitalized with psychiatric issues, and he has now given up. All right. And I know for me at one point when I felt symptomatic, my go-to strategies would be to go for distraction in activities, but they always kind of depleted me, because actually what I needed in that moment was to actually just activate the parasympathetic response, get into a calm, restful state to help my body heal. Okay. So if you start to notice that you are cultivating helpful strategies, and I teach people some strategies in my Building Resilience program, that you have greater capacity to navigate those emotions without going into those distracting activities, then that's for me a sign of healing. There's some emotional healing going on. Does that make sense? So just let me know in the chat. So I mentioned PEMS. So we've talked about the P, which is physical, E is emotion, M stands for the kind of mind level. Okay. So I've actually wrote a list today of 18 mindset shifts that can support healing, or that's my experience that they can support healing, and are signs of healing. Okay. So I'll share a few of them. I use the acronym PACTS. The P stands for pragmatism. So if we're able to make that shift from being perfectionist to more pragmatic, seeing the bigger picture, being able to keep things in perspective. For instance, yeah, I have overdone it. I have overdone it many times, but it's okay. I'm still a work in progress. I can be, kind to myself even when I overdo it. Then you're being more pragmatic. Okay. I remember the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So the P stands for pragmatism. Okay. Also stands for patience. If we notice that we're shifting from impatience to more patience, that's a sign of healing. A stands for acceptance. The more we're shifting from resistance to acceptance, again, I think that's a really important mindset shift to make, because when we resist, we lose, but only 100% of the time. We create ourselves, you've heard the quote before, pain happens, but the suffering is optional. Okay. So the more that we're able to accept things, take things in our stride, that's going to actually help put the body in the parasympathetic healing state. And this is one of the things I find, is that people start to cultivate acceptance more. Next is the C stands for calm, which we've talked a little bit about, and compassion. So shifting from self-criticism to compassion. And the S stands for strength. Okay, so instead of feeling helpless, and it's understandable if we feel helpless and hopeless from time to time, but the more that we're cultivating that quality of strength, conditioning ourselves to adopt, for instance, the mantra, I either win or I learn, then we're cultivating and developing inner strength. So that mantra, I learned it from Ray Dalio, who's the most successful investor of all time, I believe. I didn't learn it from him personally, but I worked with a coach who, loved his writings and stuff and shared that. Okay. What would that be like, is if you made that shift from, oh, I failed, I'm such an idiot, to I either win or I learn. Okay, that's a much more pragmatic approach. It's much less stressful. Let me know what you think of that. And you might have your own mantra. If you have, feel free to pop it in the chat. Love to know. Okay. Sorry, I missed one out. I said PACTS. P for pragmatism. A for acceptance. C for calm and compassion. T is for trust. So making the shift from fear-based thinking to trust-based thinking. Okay. And then the S is for strength. Okay. And a key part of that mindset shift is adopting a growth mindset so that we cultivate the identity for ourselves that you can grow, you can change, you can learn. So that mantra I just shared is a growth mindset mantra. Okay, we win or we learn. So in terms of your mind, you could just gauge, for example, if you notice that your mind is a bit like a washing machine on a fast spin cycle, are you able to just acknowledge that and take steps to slow down that spin cycle? Imagine a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, we've got that washing machine on a fast spin cycle. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got this ceiling fan just going around so slowly and quietly. Because our mind is always active, but I do think it's actually possible to quieten our mind. So the more we're able to do that, the more we're able to, for instance, use meditation as a way of stilling the mind, then again, for me, that's a sign of healing when we're able to practice that and cultivate that skill. And then the S stands for spiritual. And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm really simply talking about our kind of outlook, whether we're running the fear operating system or the trust operating system. Again, where we are on that spectrum, of course, we might move between them, but the more and more that we're moving to that trust operating system, that's a sign of healing. Okay. And we can also look at our identity. So, sorry, I've just lost my signal. Let's just see if I can get that back. Don't know why my screen's gone blank. This is fun. Give me 2 secs. Okay, so I've managed to have lost some of my notes, but that's fine. I will ad lib a little bit. Yeah, so just think about that in terms of your identity. Are you operating from that place of, I can grow, I can learn, I can take action? Let's just talk a little bit about kind of the action that you might be taking. I really encourage you to think about what inspired action you can take, no matter how small. Okay, what protocols can you develop? You might develop a kind of a daily routine. Okay, some people kind of create a loose structure for the day. Some people have a more intuitive approach. Some people have a combination. I quite like having a combination of those things. You might have a morning routine that helps you start the day right. You may have an evening routine that helps you unwind and supports great sleep. Okay, you might have strategies and protocols for dealing with a dip, dealing with symptoms, dealing with upset in helpful ways. Okay, you might have a protocol around movement so that instead of booming and busting, you're creating a sustainable approach to movement. These are all things that I explore when I train people, but just, I have got some free resources. And if you check out the YouTube channel, there's lots of videos. Check out the playlist. I've got videos on dealing with symptoms and dips, movement, dealing with anxiety. So check out, there's loads of free resources on my YouTube channel. But if you're interested in learning more about the Building Resilience course, then just put the word course below or get in touch and I'll send you a video where you can find out more. I remember one time I was talking about protocols, and I'll leave you, we'll finish with this little bit of feedback on a client's progress. So I was talking about protocols and someone was watching the live session and she put in the chat, what protocols, i.e. she didn't have any. And this was someone who had long COVID. And when she's told me that when she first came across me, her physical health score was 1 out of 10. And she started watching the videos and she made progress. And she told me, look, I'm progressing, and I've progressed a lot since I started watching your free content. And I thought, that's fantastic. And then she decided to have a block of 3 sessions. And so I checked, what is your physical health score? And she said, I'm about a 4 out of 10. Okay. I kind of thought she was doing better than that. But so we did 3 sessions and I was in touch with her literally this morning. And she told me a little while back she was about an 8, 9 out of 10. This morning she said, I'm a good 8.5, 9 out of 10. And she's working part-time. And this is the feedback she gave me. She said, I'm less moody. My heart rate is more at a normal level. I'm less dizzy. No pain or rarely periods are more, no pain, rarely periods are more normalized. Can concentrate more, can wear more different items of clothing. She says, strange one. Appetite more normal, less fear, less rashes. I can tolerate the sun more. Skin looks better. Whites of my eyes are more white. Less fatigue, less muscle soreness. Picture of a muscle. Sleep is better, at least 7 hours a night. Hair not falling out so much. Can feel muscles again. It says signs of healing are that my signs of healing are that, of course, doing more, feeling better, less anxious, more in control, calmer. I could go on and on. Okay, so that's some feedback for you. So let's see if you've got any questions about what I've talked about, then pop them in the chat. If you've got any thoughts about, for you, what are signs of healing, also put them in the chat. Very interested to hear your perspective. Okay, if you'd like to end with a very brief relaxation, just put relax in the chat and we'll do that. So I'm guessing there's a little time delay between me speaking and you hearing me. But yeah, if you'd like to end with a relaxation, just let me know in the chat. Okay, you are welcome, Alan. Okay, we've got some relaxers coming. All right, so what I ask you to do is to make yourself comfortable. And as long as it's safe to do so, close your eyes. Obviously, don't close your eyes if it's not safe. And I'd like you just to breathe in through your nose, as long as that's comfortable, into your belly, and breathe out of your nose. And as you breathe in and out, I invite you just to make the out breath a little bit longer than the in breath. And as you breathe in and out, just allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. There are a number of different breathing techniques. There's box breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, then hold for 4. There's 7-11 breathing, where you breathe in for 7 and breathe out for 11. I was going to make a joke about the 7-11 supermarkets, but that might be lost on some people. But I encourage you just to find your own natural rhythm of breath. And as you breathe in, I invite you just to activate that part of you, okay, that has the capacity for wisdom. That part of you that has the capacity to observe in a relaxed way. And I invite you just to connect with your physical body, to just become the observer of your physical body, just noticing any sensations. There might be sensations that are not so comfortable, and there may be other sensations in your body that are comfortable. Just notice what you notice without any response, without any internal dialogue. Just be the observer. And now move your attention to your feelings and your emotion again from the perspective of the observer. Just observing whatever emotions and feelings are around right now. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to do anything other than just observe, to breathe into them, just to use your breath as a resource. To breathe in and out, just witnessing. Knowing you have got that capacity to just observe from that neutral space. So now I invite you to just bring your attention to your mind. We talked earlier about that spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, we've got the washing machine on a fast spin cycle. On the other end, we've got that ceiling fan quietly turning. Just notice where you are on that spectrum, knowing that wherever you are, it is possible to move closer, to move towards that ceiling fan, to quiet and still the mind. Maybe you're doing that right now. And so now, I invite you to bring your attention to that kind of spiritual dimension. And just notice where you are in terms of operating from fear, operating from trust. Know that there is a part of you that has the capacity to operate from trust, from a place of love towards yourself and others. And we can cultivate that ability. So before I started learning all this brain training stuff, working with the body, the emotions, I was very good at generating anxiety. And I've learned to become rubbish at it and much better at operating from that place of trust more and more and more. So consider that it is possible for you also. So know that you can access this place, and maybe already you've noticed some changes from just doing this brief relaxation. You can allow yourself to carry on relaxing right now. If you're ready, you can bring yourself back. And as you open your eyes, you can just give yourself a little stretch, wiggle your fingers and toes. And just let me know in the chat, how did you find that? You clocked your score for calm before. Feel free to pop your before score and your after score in the chat. Remember, the scale is from 0 to 10, with 10 being extremely calm. So Catherine says, thank you for motivating us. You are welcome. And Alan says, very nice. Dana says, thank you. You are welcome. So remember, you are amazing. You have got an amazing capacity to decide to learn and grow, and to take inspired action. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat or get in touch. Keep going. You've got this. Thanks for joining me. It's very nice having some interaction. And until next time, bye for now.